What we see is it's being used to silence criticism of political officials and genuine debate about policy.
The biggest purveyors of misinformation and disinformation are typically the government.
Oh, welcome back to the Brussels Signal studio. We are happy today to have not one, not two, but three congressmen with us. We have Jim Jordan, who is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Scott Fitzgerald, who is from the Subcommittee on Antitrust, and Kevin Kiley, Congressman from California. We are here to talk about the EU censorship legislation, better known here in Brussels as the Digital Services Act. And my first question, Congressman, is fairly straightforward. We know that in the US you don't like this legislation. What's wrong with it, please?
Well, I think is how you described it. We think it's censorship, and thanks for having us on your show. We think it's censorship, and we're against that. You know, we had a witness last year in Congress. She was a reporter from Canada, covered the trucker strike and some other things. She came as a witness, and I think one of the really interesting things she said in the course of her testimony is she said, you know, one of the hallmarks of Western civilization is the ability to debate. If you can't settle disputes via debate, the alternative is scary. And the idea of real debate is you have free expression, you make your argument, I make my argument, and then we have a vote and we settle things. That's how it is. And we have in our country the First Amendment. And I would argue the most important liberty under that First Amendment is our right to talk and not have government try to chill that speech, or target you for things you say. So we're very concerned about this. And I guess specifically to the Digital Services Act, it started 11 months ago when Mr. Breton, a member of the European Union Commission, sends a letter to Mr. Musk. And the very first sentence in that letter I think is interesting because he's sending a letter to an American about an American company regarding an American election, the most important election we have, election for president. And he says the context that for this letter are events that are happening in the UK. And I'm thinking, well, the UK is not a member of the EU. America certainly isn't. So this is the European Union trying to censor not only people in Europe, which we have problems with, but also people around the world. And that's where we have to really get focused as members of, the legislature in the United States. So that's our concern. And we've had meetings today and we've expressed those concerns to officials in the European Union.
That would be including the commissioner responsible, Commissioner Verkunen, would it? And go on.
She met with us in Washington a few months ago, and then, of course, we met with her earlier today.
How did it go? Are you optimistic that maybe something will change?
Well, we're hopeful, and we certainly expressed the same thing to the Vice President as I just described to you.
And how did she respond?
She kept talking and talked about how wonderful this is, and we agree with you want to stop bad. You don't want like kids being exploited. There's certain things we all agree with, but so much of it now is misinformation, disinformation. Who defines that? Who puts the trusted flaggers in place? Who tell us what that is? How does that all work out? And our experience in the United States is the biggest purveyors of misinformation and disinformation are typically the government. And we saw it all during COVID. So we don't put a whole lot of confidence in that, but we agree with some parts of it, but certainly not the part that restricts political speech.
Okay, and how far could this go? Because obviously here in Europe, we're very dependent on US tech, as you know. And is there a risk that US companies could pull out of Europe?
Absolutely. There's 7 corporations that are currently listed as gatekeepers by the DSA, and 6 of the 7 are American corporations. Who are the innovators? They're the ones that are driving the train on just about everything we do. And there were some concerns raised this morning about AI and where is that headed as, again, U.S. corporations have stepped up to try and innovate. And yet the gatekeepers are the ones that are being subjected to a ton of scrutiny by the DSA and now having fines levied against them. So I think there's an uneasiness back in the States that this was specifically designed to go after those corporations. And as a result of it, like you described, I think those corporations will pull back, and you won't see the types of innovation you're seeing in the States right now, certainly in the European Union.
And I'm wondering what else you can do. Obviously, the EU is not a state, but it sort of has its own sovereignty. And other than put your case, are there any other measures you can take? I'm wondering, for example, if this could be included in the details of the trade deal. You're nodding.
Well, we hope so, and never forget the Vice President Vance's speech a couple months ago, where he talked about this shared commitment to freedom, the shared commitment that both sides of the Atlantic have always had towards free speech. And I thought the Vice President's speech, or most of his speeches, or all of his speeches, was very well done, and he sort of cut to the chase. So I do think that's important. To the question that Scott just answered, I think, do American companies care? Yeah. I mean, Apple has 500 million reasons why they care. They just got hit with a fine. And they told us in a meeting on Saturday that they were actually slower in rolling out things, particularly as Scott mentioned, relative to AI here in Europe because of the uncertainty and the concerns around the DMA and, of course, the DSA.
That's a really important point that folks should be emphasized, is that folks here in Europe are being hamstrung because of this right now. Apple did not release Apple Intelligence here, and they rolled it at the same time they shipped it in the US. And all the latest AI models, they're a lot slower to get here to the EU. So not only can ordinary citizens not use them, but your developers can't use them either, and it's harder for them to compete against other foreign competitors.
I'm just wondering where the compromise might lie. I mean, does the EU have to move, or is the US going to say, sorry, your problem, we're off? I mean, is there any room for compromise?
I think you'll see the market dry up. And once that happens, we've been almost inundated with the idea that America continues to be the innovator, and then China steals the ideas, and Europe has regulated everything. So, at the end of the day, I think people are going to realize what's going on, and it's simply going to help the tech area in the States, I think, even more. So you might sit back and say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem is that we know that all of these different ideas and programs, they need to be global. If it's going to work, it needs to be adopted globally, and I don't think that's going to happen right now.
Obviously, we put these concerns to the European Commission, who told us that 99% of content moderation is voluntary, and the EU takedown orders are rare. How do you respond to that?
Well, we have this concept that we I think well understand in America, where you chill speech, and when you have this big regulatory entity and body in this law, they can say, well, that's part of their terms of service, and they're taking it down. Yeah, but their terms, it's like it's all moving down to the lowest common denominators, what we believe is happening. And even if it is not all just the chilling impact and what's going on, there's still 1% that's not terms of service takedown of content. And at some point, you're looking at the actual content, and it could be just pure political speech that they're taking down. But if it's just driven by the government, there's still the government taking down speech. And we just think that is not healthy. We had a witness, he's now a member of the cabinet in the Trump administration, but he testified as well. And this is back when he was a Democrat, not part of our party, but RFK Jr., back when he was running for president, frankly, two years ago. And he made a great statement. He said, when you look at history, it is never the good guys who are for censorship. It is always the bad guys. It is always the bad guys. And it typically starts off with, quote, good intentions. And we're not disagreeing with some of those. Frankly, probably most of those, all of those. But when it gets into political speech, we got a real problem.
I mean, this is how this law, I think, was largely sold to the European Parliament, to the members of the public here, is, well, we need to protect minors, and we need to protect against incitement to violence and other crimes that occur using these platforms. And we agree with all of those things, but what we see is it's being used to silence criticism of political officials and genuine debate about policy. And while maybe such things have happened for some time in Europe, because our countries have different approaches to the issue of freedom of speech, with the DSA, we see it happening in a systematic and globalized way that implicates people in our country, and I think is causing this sort of shared commitment that the EU and the US have had throughout history to freedom, to fray in some respects at a time when you see the commitment to these values in other parts of the world that are really under attack. And so I'm hoping, as part of these negotiations that are going on right now, there will be an opportunity to negotiate this and to reaffirm our shared commitment to freedom of speech as a value that underlies democracy.
How much of this is hidden censorship? Because obviously you have takedowns, you can actually see what's being taken down, but it seems that the algorithms are moving towards some kind of covert censorship. Is it even possible to keep a handle on this kind of thing?
We think so, and I think you're right. What's the technical term? Shadow banning and different things that happen. So we're concerned about that. But again, you got 27 member states with their kind of law, and then how it filters up and works in conjunction with the Commission and the European Union in this convoluted thing. I think that just forces it to go to whoever has the worst standard, sort of becomes the standard. And we're convinced that whatever that standard ends up being will not be consistent. We've already seen examples where it is not consistent with the First Amendment.
Okay, and finally, let me come back to my first question, which is what can the US do? Because there might be lots of people who are watching us now and say, this is great, they agree with everything you've said, but here in Europe, nevertheless, these laws are now in force. I mean, is it the case? Is the US going to come to Europe's rescue?
I think it's important when we get back, and I'll let Scott talk, but I think it's important when we get back that we touch base with folks in the White House. I think it's important we talk to the Commerce Secretary, the Trade Representative, and talk to them about this issue that, again, was, I think, raised appropriately so and in a very articulate way by the Vice President. I think Secretary Lutnick said earlier this week that the DSA, the DMA are attacks on American companies. So there's that element that is certainly part of any trade negotiations that are the details of the trade negotiations that move forward.
I think we've seen some very innovative individuals. We talked to some of them related to apps that are being developed right now, and the level of frustration was just unbelievable, to the point where they said, we won't do business here. We will be in the States. And I think if that continues, you're going to see that market shift, and there will be a ton of pressure on the EU to then react to that.
Okay, well, Congressman, thank you very much for coming in this afternoon.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks again for watching.